Hello and welcome to 2020 in 20 minutes, a slightly different video from TLDR News, where we run you through the stories you might have missed or forgotten amid a very tumultuous year, starting with
This is not an end, but a beginning.
2020 begins in a very fitting way. The Australian bushfires, which were prominent in the news in 2019, continue to burn, and as the new year rolls in, 500 million animals had already died, and on the 2nd of January, New South Wales declared a state of emergency. They'll continue to burn for some months to come, coming to an end around May. By this time, 3,500 homes will have been destroyed and nearly 500 people killed, either directly or indirectly, through things such as inhalation of smoke. On the 3rd of January, the US killed Iranian General Qasem Soleimani in Baghdad via an airstrike, a strike that was ordered by US President Donald Trump. While Soleimani was a key figure in the Iranian regime and seen as a heroic figure by many in Iran, President Trump claimed that he was, directly and indirectly, responsible for the deaths of millions of people. He also claimed that Soleimani was responsible for many American deaths. Later in January, on the 7th, an intern at NASA helped discover the first known instance of a planet orbiting a binary star system. Wolf Kakir, who just finished his junior year at Scarsdale High School, worked at the Goddard Space Center for his summer internship, where he was examining variations of star brightness. And as part of this job, he found the first binary system. And all of that happened in the first week of 2020, so we better speed things up a little bit. Iran retaliated Soleimani's assassination and strikes 2 military bases in Iraq, stoking fears of World War III before we've even taken our Christmas decorations down. Then on the 30th, the World Health Organization declares COVID-19 a World Health Emergency of international concern, and the next day at 11 PM, the UK officially leaves the EU and enters the transition period, which I'm sure won't come up again. Just quickly, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel for more updates on stories like this day by day rather than year by year. And if UK politics and Brexit isn't your thing, then no worries, we also have an EU, a US, and a brand new global news channel, all of which are linked down below.
And we think we have it very well under control.
As February rolled in, the coronavirus began to take centre stage in the news. February begins with the World Health Organization naming the virus COVID-19, with the name reflecting its shape, with the virus looking similar to a crown, and the year it was first circulated, 2019. This new name and heightened media attention it brought demonstrated just how much this virus would dominate our lives in 2020. The Delhi riots then occurred on the 23rd of February. These were violent protests between the Hindu and Muslim populations in the country. They followed a controversial Citizenship Amendment Act, which allowed citizens of Pakistan, Bangladesh and Afghanistan to have fast-tracked citizenship if they belonged to one of 6 religions. Islam, however, did not make the list. As part of these riots, 53 people died and over 200 were injured. On the 29th of February, Luxembourg became the first country in the world to make public transport completely free. This meant that anyone using any form of public transport could do so without a ticket. The minister in charge claimed that this would reduce the gap between the rich and the poor, and was mainly motivated by social factors rather than economic ones. In other news, on February 27th, the Dow Jones fell by 4.4%, the largest decrease in a single day and the worst week since the 2008 crash, and this is due to fears that COVID is spreading. February also had an extra day this year, proving once and for all that time does not fly when no one is having fun. Thanks, 2020.
No Prime Minister wants to enact measures like this.
By the time March begins, the world has started watching Italy closely. It's clear that Italy has become the European centre for the virus, and many are keen to find out how they plan to deal with the outbreak. By the 9th of March, they have their answer. Italy places its population under lockdown, and this happens just one day after many of their major cities were previously placed in lockdown. 2 days later, on the 11th, the World Health Organization declares COVID-19 a pandemic, and the virus continues to spread. For anyone looking back on 2020, March is clearly the month where the virus moves from affecting only a handful of countries to becoming a global disaster that affects everyone. For us in the UK, this became clear on the 23rd of March. This is when the Prime Minister implored us all to stay home and save lives. Although the government had issued advice on staying home the week prior, it became clear that this mere guidance was not enough. Criticism was made of the decision to allow the Cheltenham Festival to continue between the 16th and 19th of March, and arguments were made that this, alongside the Liverpool vs Atletico Madrid football match, may have contributed to the virus's spread in Britain. The Coronavirus Act was swiftly passed by the House of Commons, giving the government the legal powers required to enforce the stay-at-home message, and ensuring that these kind of events would not continue. March was generally a big month for closures though, with the Nepalese government closing Mount Everest and the EU closing its external borders and the Schengen area for at least 30 days because of COVID. And in a bid to make sure we were stuck inside with nothing to watch on TV, the Euro 2020 finals and Eurovision were both cancelled. We'll leave it to you to decide which of those is the bigger loss there.
Everybody knows what's going on there.
The coronavirus pandemic continued to dominate the news in April. As many would have expected, not all of this news was grounded in either fact or reality. Misinformation about the virus, specifically links between it and 5G, continued to spread, and on the 5th of April, YouTube promised to take such videos down. On the 14th of April, President Trump became critical of the WHO's efforts to notify the world of the new virus earlier in the year. He announces that the US will be suspending money that would have been sent to the WHO pending an investigation into its handling of the crisis. On the 27th of April, the US Pentagon released footage of unidentified aerial phenomenon, or to everyone else, UFOs. As with all of this kind of footage, it's not exactly high resolution, and doesn't show much clearly. So if you are hoping that we might have discovered aliens this year, we're sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but it seems like a lot more evidence is needed. In ironic news, on April 4th, a prison riot occurred in Batman, Turkey, following the release of 100 prisoners. Bruce Wayne is yet to comment. And on April 26th, King Salman of Saudi Arabia issued a royal decree banning the execution of prisoners for crimes committed as minors. And with that, April ends, and somehow still feels like March. While the coronavirus pandemic continued, more and more events were cancelled. It goes without saying that many different football matches were cancelled, including any ongoing leagues and cups. Luckily for football fans though, the German Bundesliga returned on May 16th, becoming the first major league in the world to do so during the pandemic. As the year went on, many others followed suit, with coronavirus precautions of course. On the 22nd of May, Pakistan Air Flight 8303 crashed in a densely populated area near the runway on its second attempt at a landing. The crash caused the death of 97 of the 99 people on board, and also killed 9 people on the ground. On May 25th, George Floyd was murdered by a police officer, sparking protests around the world and reigniting the Black Lives Matter movement. His infamous "I can't breathe" became the slogan of the movement, and continues to this day. On May 5th, the UK became the country with the highest death toll in the world. On May 27th, the Chinese National People's Congress voted to introduce national security legislation that would aim to stop foreign interference in Hong Kong. And Twitter also started fact-checking Trump's tweets, which he took really well.
Why people are kneeling, blindfolded, and being led to trains in modern China.
Following China's controversial security law, which threatened to undermine the freedom of speech in Hong Kong and make it easier to prosecute protesters, the UK government felt compelled to act against this. As a result, Prime Minister Johnson agreed on the 3rd of June to change immigration rules to allow Hong Kong citizens to return to the UK. On the 23rd of June, an earthquake hit Oaxaca in Mexico. With a magnitude of 7.4, it's estimated that 49 million people felt the quake, with it going on to kill 10 people and injuring 23. Many buildings were damaged, including 213 schools and 15 health centres. Later in the month, on the 30th, the proposed security bill became law, heightening the tension between the UK and China amid accusations of human rights abuses of the Uyghur people in Xinjiang. June also saw another grim milestone related to the coronavirus, with global cases passing 10 million. June clearly was a barrel of laughs for all involved. On June 21st, a solar eclipse occurred and was mainly visible from Africa, lasting for about 38 seconds, which is more time than most people have spent smiling in 2020. And of course, the best thing to happen is this YouTube merch was launched.
Like you'll go person, woman, man, camera, TV.
July begins with news from Russia. The Russian President Vladimir Putin proposed changing the constitution to allow him to serve as president for longer, as he's currently only able to serve until 2024. However, the proposed changes would allow him to continue ruling as leader for another 2 6-year terms. This means that Russia could live under Putin's presidency until 2036. Russian voters were given the opportunity to vote on the changes on July 1st. And the amendment passed with the support of 77.92% of the electorate. With such a high level of support, it's only natural that some began to question the legitimacy of the vote. On the 15th of July, the world was hit by a Bitcoin scam, and not a small one either. The scammers managed to gain access to the Twitter accounts of world leaders and celebrities, trying to convince people to send them funds. Former President Obama, then former Vice President Joe Biden, Kim Kardashian and Kanye West all had their accounts compromised by scammers. Later in the month, on July 19th, the Brahmaputra River flooded. The river flows through many Asian countries, but the flood mainly happened in the Assam region of India. As you'd expect, it was caused by a lot of monsoon rain, and the flood caused a lot of damage to homes and businesses, tragically killing 19 people. It's estimated that in total, the flood affected 9 million people. In lighter news, Kanye West announced his bid for leader of the free world to prove that he's the best rapping president since George Washington in Hamilton. Speaking of people that no one expected to become president, Trump began bragging about passing a test which detects cognitive decline, a test which I made some of the TLDR team do for a video. And finally, after 30 years of hurt, Liverpool were crowned Premier League champions, something that our editor Alex is very pleased about and insisted made it into the video.
Let's fight with hope. Let's fight with confidence.
August began with yet another tragic event, the Beirut explosion. This occurred on the 14th of August, and initially many were confused about what caused it. Some speculated that it was a terror attack or some act of war, including the US president. However, the cause was simply some badly stored ammonium nitrate, which was accidentally detonated in the port of the city. This caused an estimated $15 billion worth of damage and took 204 lives. Lebanon was already struggling with COVID-19, and hospitals were struggling to cope with both coronavirus cases and those injured by the disaster. If you've spotted the cards on screen promoting our videos and want to check one of them out, even this one on Beirut, then all of them are linked in the description, so feel free to give them a watch. On the 9th of August, President Lukashenko won re-election in Belarus. He's been in power since the downfall of the USSR, and it seems like his win was caused by vote rigging. His opponent contested the election, but was threatened by the country's leadership. In response, she subsequently fled to Lithuania in order to escape the harassment. The protests against Lukashenko's regime lasted months, and many still don't accept the result of the fraudulent election. On the 26th of August, Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos became the first person ever to exceed $200 billion in net worth. This put him about $90 billion ahead of the second richest person alive, Bill Gates. This increase in wealth was likely massively bolstered by Amazon's success during the pandemic. As if the world hadn't already seen enough tragedy, on August 7th, an Air India plane crashed on the runway, killing 19 of the 191 people on board. Kamala Harris also became the first woman of colour to be named a major party's presidential ticket. And in another first, President Putin announces that Russia is approving the world's first COVID vaccine. And in fairness to anti-vaxxers, they might have a reason to be slightly sceptical about that one.
The question is, Justice, radical left. Will you shut up, man? Listen, who is?
On September 14th, the Royal Astronomical Society discovered phosphine in the atmosphere of Venus. This was touted as being a possible building block for molecular life on the planet. Although later in the year, this was found to be maybe a little optimistic. A processing error was found in the data, meaning that it's a lot less likely that microbial life exists on Venus. It seems that despite the excitement in September, more work needs to be done to discover the truth about phosphine. Maybe we all just got a bit too excited a bit too early. On the 16th of September, the UN found Venezuela guilty of crimes against humanity. Most of the crimes that the regime was accused of are in relation to attempts to silence opposition and protest. The regime has also been accused of unlawful executions, enforced disappearances, and arbitrary detention. The report included testimonies from 220 people, highlighting the systemic abuse of power flowing through the governing regime of Venezuela. On the 27th of September, Armenia and Azerbaijan forces clashed over disputed territory. As this story has a lot of history and context, it would be a push for us to explain this whole conflict in a paragraph. Lucky for you, Zach's written a video explaining it, so if you want to find out more about the conflict, check out the link in the description. Before we wake you up when September ends, Supreme Court icon Ruth Bader Ginsburg sadly passed away after a long and decorated legacy. Another matriarch was also displaced when Barbados announced intentions to remove Queen Elizabeth II as their head of state. Clearly, they weren't a fan of Netflix's The Crown. And in strange news, a version of The Two Noble Kinsmen from 1634 written by William Shakespeare is found in Spain, which means that even Shakespeare had more holidays than you did this year.
It would be nice, just nice, if this house was shown some respect.
Throughout the majority of 2020, the transition period has given the UK the time it needs to negotiate a new deal with the EU, before finally leaving all elements of the Union. While no deal was in sight throughout October, the UK was insisting on its internal market bill. This bill broke the withdrawal agreement, and thus international law. The EU gave the UK until the 1st of December to remove the problematic clauses before legal action began. This deadline elapsed and the clauses remained. The EU therefore did exactly what they said they'd do and launched legal bids. On the 17th of October, New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern won a landslide at the general election, securing herself a second term. She won by a landslide, likely helped by the increased international presence she brought to the role. On the 26th of October, scientists confirmed that significant amounts of water do exist on the moon's sunlit side. This could help with future missions, as it could obviously be used when processed for drinking water, and can be separated into oxygen and hydrogen, which could then be used for breathing and as a propellant respectively. This is a big discovery, and was a welcome distraction from the trauma of the rest of the news in 2020. As we're almost at the end of this long year, let's keep this October summary brief, because on October 20th, a NASA spaceship landed on an asteroid. The first time a NASA spaceship has been able to land on an asteroid and collect samples. Back on Earth, President Trump and the First Lady tested positive for COVID-19. And on October 23rd, after 11 years of demining, the Falkland Islands were declared as free of landmines. A bit of good news. Could 2020 be looking up? Surely not.
Oh my goodness, all the networks. Wow.
November kicks off with the final few days of the 2020 presidential campaigns, with the election then taking place on the 3rd. But unfortunately for all of us interested, the counting takes a long time. Election day becomes election week, and even when it seems likely that when all's said and done Biden will become the next president, the incumbent, President Trump, refuses to accept that he lost. On November 9th, the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine is shown to be 90% effective against COVID-19. This is the first announcement about the effectiveness of a vaccine, and brings hope to many people across the world that this nightmare might soon be over. Over the next few days, more and more announcements are made about other vaccines and their efficacy. 2 days later, on the 11th, Russia announces that its vaccine, Sputnik V, is also 90% effective. Moderna demonstrates that its vaccine is 94.5% effective. Then 7 days later, the Oxford vaccine is demonstrated to be between 70 and 90% effective, which means that November truly was a good month for news about coronavirus vaccines, and possibly showed us a light at the end of the tunnel. Near the end of the month, Mohsin Fakhrizadeh was assassinated. This is huge news because he's one of Iran's top nuclear scientists. When the news broke, little was known about who was behind the assassination or why, and little is still known about it. The Iranians initially blamed Israel without any real evidence, and it was later revealed that he was killed by a machine gun controlled by AI. But again, it's unclear who is behind the attack. In another edition of Quickfire News, on November 4th, the US officially leaves the Paris Climate Agreement, making a major political statement around the world. Incidentally, another political statement was made by Rudy Giuliani outside Four Seasons Total Landscaping in November, a scene which will be considered far-fetched, even in an episode of Veep.
So, have yourselves a merry little Christmas.
The UK's Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency approved the use of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. This was the first vaccine that had gone through clinical trials and had been approved for use within a population. Only a week later, the first person in the world to receive the vaccine was Margaret Keenan, a 90-year-old grandmother from the UK. This news is very likely uplifting to many of those who have been awaiting a vaccine as a start to properly turn the tide on this awful disease. While that was good news, later in the month on the 20th, a new strain of the virus was discovered. While it seems unlikely that the vaccines will cease to work against the new strain, it has caused quite a headache for governments. This is because the new strain is around 70% more infectious and has caused major regional spikes across the UK. On Christmas Eve, a comprehensive free trade deal between the UK and EU was finally announced. This followed months of anticipation and a lot of speculation that the UK may leave without a deal. This was pretty much the worst time it could have been announced, and was only days away from the transition period ending, meaning that businesses couldn't fully prepare, and many of our staff were on holiday, so making a video became a lot harder. And with the world still reeling from Brexit, we look forward to a new year that at the very least can't possibly be as bad as this one. Happy New Year everyone, and I think I speak for everyone when I say F 2020. If you want to be updated on news from us as 2021 progresses, then be sure to subscribe to not only this channel, but also all of the TLDR network. A link to all of the channels can be found below, so find your favourites and get subscribed now. Also, as I said, all of the videos we mentioned are linked in the description, so be sure to check them out too.